It's that time again at the Critical Gentleman. Welcome to Top 5 Friday. We're trying something a little different today with a new layout. I've been listening to your feedback about the format of my videos and figured I'd give something new a try. So before we begin, let me know what you think about this new video style down in the comments, and stick around because today we're talking about the 5 most iconic chronograph watches of all time. Before we run down the list, I want to explain some of the criteria that I considered when choosing these 5 watches. One of the most important things I considered was how recognizable the watches were, hence they're being considered iconic. However, along that line, I also considered how long they had been in production. The result is a list of watches that were introduced right around the mid-20th century and been in continuous production ever since. Rather than attempt to rank them, I'll simply go in chronological order, starting with the earliest model introduced. The first watch on the list is the IWC Portuguese. This watch was introduced in 1939 as a highly accurate wristwatch and was oversized at 43 millimeters. At that time, watches rarely exceeded 33 millimeters, so this was considered almost huge. Although it started as a time-only watch, the Portuguese went through several iterations over its lifespan until around the mid-90s when IWC created their automatic winding chronograph caliber. It used an in-house movement at just about 40 millimeters in diameter and quickly became IWC's most successful watch of all time. In fact, if you consider modern iterations of this watch, it is still very classically designed with a similar aesthetic to the original. Overall, it is not just an excellent watch in terms of the styling, the size, and the movement, but it is extremely iconic and recognizable and one of the most heralded chronographs of the modern era. Next we have the Breitling Navigator, which was introduced in 1952 after the success of their Chronomat in 1942. This watch has garnered a cult following among North American pilots as well as pilots the world over. Its reputation as an aviation watch has carried it all the way into the 21st century, and even though the characteristic slide rule bezel is no longer a necessary tool in order to do in-flight calculations, it is still a vital part of the Navigator identity. The Navigator has also been produced in a menagerie of complications, sizes, styles, and designs. However, the overall aesthetic has remained unchanged since its introduction in 1952. You can check out my full review and history of the Breitling Navigator in my previous uploads, but for the sake of brevity, we're going to go on to the next watch for now. The next watch was introduced in 1957, and if I were going to rank them, might win itself the number 1 most iconic watch spot. However, because I'm not doing that, it is number 3 on the list chronologically, and that is the Omega Speedmaster Professional. Now, when it was introduced in 1957, this watch was not called the Professional, it was simply the Omega Speedmaster, and that's reflected on this year's re-edition of the 1957 Omega Speedmaster just announced at Baselworld. Of course, the Speedmaster solidified its place in history in 1969 when it became the first watch to land on the moon. However, even before the moon landings, Omega enjoyed a relationship with NASA, and some Speedmasters found themselves in orbit prior to the landings themselves. Regardless, the Speedmaster is not only one of history's most important watches, or most iconic watches, but also one of history's most unchanged watches. The minute differences between the different Speedmaster references require an informed eye even to notice, but they make a great deal of difference in the value of a vintage timepiece. And there is no shortage of different variations, either limited editions or simply other versions, that allow customers to choose a Speedmaster that suits their aesthetic most. I've also reviewed this watch in a past video, which you can check out in my prior uploads as well. Next up is the Rolex Daytona Chronograph, which was released in 1963. Rather than aviation or spaceflight, the Rolex Daytona was marketed as a motorsports watch. This watch has also been available in many different variations, with some of the most sought-after vintage references fetching over 6 figures at auction now. The most well-known variety, of course, being the Paul Newman dial, which was available on a number of different references, and if authentic, increases their value significantly. Overall, it continues to be one of Rolex's flagship models and demands a premium from customers. Last up is a watch released in 1964, and that is the Heuer Carrera. This was also marketed as a motorsports watch, and Heuer and Tag Heuer have continued their connection to the automotive racing industry to this day. The Carrera has a distinctive case profile which features angled and faceted lugs. It originally used the Valjoux 72 manual wind movement, but has switched to a few different varieties over the years. Currently, the Tag Heuer Carrera uses their automatic winding caliber 16 movement. It's been made in any number of sizes, with the original starting at 35 and the current iteration I believe is 43 millimeters. It was very tempting to select the Monaco instead, of course, having that relationship to Steve McQueen. However, the reason I chose the Carrera number 1 is because it was introduced earlier in 1964 as opposed to 1969, and because it is my personal preference. I do own a Carrera. This one is the 1964 re-edition, so it is almost a faithful reproduction of the original reference. However, this one was produced in the 2000s and uses the Lemania 1863 manual wind movement, which is actually the same as the Omega Moonwatch professional movement. Anyway, that's my choice for top 5 most iconic chronographs of all time. Keep in mind I didn't necessarily say best, but most recognizable, most well-known, and certainly longest running and still available. So let me know what you think. If you have anything that I missed, let me know down in the comments. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to hearing from you guys. Thanks for watching.